Over the past week, I went back to what I would describe a large part of my childhood. Obviously, these three games I've played over the years here and there with a variety of different mods like Chaos Mod or Remasters, etc, etc. But it's been a very long time since I sat down and really just played for what these games actually were. These games obviously being GTA 3, Vice City and San Andreas. I've played the originals, I've played them extensively, and I know how the games felt, and I know exactly how I feel when I'm thinking back at those glory days of when I played them for the first time or played them for the 10th time, because I never ever got sick of these games. Now you might be thinking, oh, here he goes, he's gonna have another episode of look at me guys, I've played these games a bunch of times, I'm Gtamen and I'm cool. I'm saying all this stuff because I want you to know what kind of person you're listening to before we get into this whole ordeal, whether or not you should buy it. I think the conversation around these remasters has not really been around the games themselves, rather what the politics are behind the games and not necessarily focused on the game themselves. Sure, there has been enough criticism about the games and the updates have been done to them, and we will be covering that too, but I feel it's fair to bring a video into the world that will cover the entirety of these remasters, including the games themselves. So without further ado and that lengthy intro done, let's get right into the good, the bad, and the ugly of the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition games. First up, I should clarify what exactly I qualify good, bad, and ugly. I'll keep this short. Good is just simply like, this is nice, this is a very welcome change or a very welcome addition to the game. Bad is gonna be like, I'm not really a huge fan of it, I can look behind it, I can accept it, I can deal with it, but I wouldn't mind it if they were to fix it. And ugly is, well, they should fix this yesterday. With that out of the way, let's start off with the good. The world. Holy crap. The update that was done to the stores in Vice City to give them more interiors, their 3D models in them, and the way that the overall world was updated is simply nothing short of very nice. Giving the world some more depth by having interiors given to stores rather than just being 2D pictures is definitely a very nice change and definitely makes you go like, hey, that's kind of cool, there's now actually an interior for those players who've playing this for the second, third or 20th time. The nice thing about those interiors is that I actually found myself to look out for them as I was playing the game to kind of see like, hey, that's how they changed that store, hey, that's how they changed that store. It just kind of gives a little bit more depth and a little bit more life to the game and the world itself. The second thing I really enjoy about these Trilogy remasters is how smooth the game feels like. Performance mode is by far the way to go if you're on console. 60 FPS really makes this game feel very nice. The shooting becomes a lot smoother, aiming becomes a whole lot smoother, and just overall, it just feels more modern. It doesn't feel as clunky as the old systems, especially the PlayStation 2 version, because holy crap, if you ever went back to those games so you tried to use the targeting system on GTA 3 and Vice City, that is rough. And it's not an enjoyable experience in this current day and age. Especially with the controls update that they have done as well, it really drives home that this game feels a lot more modern, but still feels like the old game. It's not like you suddenly start walking as you're aiming with Claude or with Tommy, because that is what they stuck with to still make the game feel like it used to. Obviously on PC, the FPS increase definitely feels buttery smooth and the shooting really has never felt as good, and just the overall game feels very nice. It seems overall to be pretty well optimized, except for GTA 3 definitely seems to be the least optimized here. On a high-end system, I was hitting 40 FPS from time to time, which means that, yeah, it's not perfect just yet, but I do believe with the latest patch that has released on Sunday, it did seem to be a little bit better already. So they are working on patches. Hopefully all those teething issues will continue to become improved. Vice City seems to be the best one out of the bunch in terms of both performance and the way that the game looks in my opinion, and overall it seems to be running fine for most, if not all people, aside from the few hiccups here and there. PC release in terms of performance seems to be totally fine, aside from the launch, but I've made a separate video on that and we're just gonna focus on the game in this video. Another nice addition about this new aiming system too is the fact that you can just simply hold down the trigger and then use the M4 and the M16 in GTA 3 and Vice City respectively, as a laser beam, because if you've played GTA 3, you know that the M16 is an absolute beast and will destroy everything in its way. It's still overpowered, and I love it. Jokes aside for a second, it does allow console players to use the same laser beams as you would on PC, so that's definitely a very welcome addition. As you might know from previous experiences, if you try to aim the gun, then you have a lot of recoil, but for some reason if you hip fire it, it's totally fine. One thing that I have to say that I'm very happy with is that the games feel like they used to, but they play and look more modern. I have to say that from an overall feel and look point of view, Grove Street Games and Rockstar have done a great job. You can definitely tell that they've definitely made sure to keep an eye on that. Definitely based on the amount of interviews they've done where they were like, we were very afraid of touching this slide thing because it might upset some people. Speaking of upsetting people, the soundtracks are mostly intact, but a few songs are obviously missing, which is a shame, but I personally don't find a massive deal. Obviously it would have been nice to have like Billie Jean and those sort of songs in there still, but I don't think that with a few songs missing it would really ruin the entire soundtracks. And obviously if you want to, you can still put them on Spotify if it really is a massive deal. And that does it for the good part of it. Let's move over to the bad. Some of the character models, though overall I am pleasantly surprised, there's only a few where I went like, really? Especially in GTA 3 and Vice City, I think most of the models, if not all of them, really do look good and are true to their original, if not look even a little bit better. When it comes to San Andreas though, that's where stuff starts to become a little bit more questionable. Think about your girlfriend Denise, as well as some of the Vigos and some other characters within there. You definitely can tell that the scope of the game has really let down some of the character models and some of the finer details within that game. Hopefully they will maybe get around to it and update those character models with further patches. That would be a very welcome addition. GTA 3 and Vice City on PC have this really weird thing going on where the camera keeps trying to jerk itself back to the default stance behind the car. San Andreas doesn't have this issue, but it's really annoying, considering the fact that for the first time we are now actually able to just move our camera about in GTA 3 and Vice City by just simply being able to move our mouse so we can like look around us and see what's happening. But having this camera constantly try to go back to stick behind the car at all times you're not allowed to move is pretty annoying, and I really hope they'll fix this, because while it's not super annoying, especially if you played the originals, because you have a mouse in your hand and you want to move it about, it would be ideal if the camera would at least allow you for a few seconds to stay in the stance that you were at that current moment in time. The billboards and props from GTA 5 that are within the game, along with some other assets. Personally, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the Infinite Rage statue being in GTA San Andreas, a Vinewood Zombie movie poster in GTA Vice City, and a whole host of other variety of things that seemingly to me don't really make a lot of sense to be in GTA Vice City or GTA 3 or San Andreas. Mostly because of the way that the timelines are and just the purity of those games. I don't think that there was any mention whatsoever of an Infinite Rage action figure or anything along those lines in GTA San Andreas. It simply doesn't really fit in my opinion. It's something that I wouldn't mind if they were to have changed or just stick to the original, though it doesn't majorly bother me. It is something that I personally really feel is out of place. I understand that it's meant to be like, oh haha, this is a GTA 5 Easter egg, but GTA 5 is set in 2013 and not in 1986, and it's something that even in Vice City, especially a Vinewood Zombie movie poster, doesn't really make any sense, considering at the time that they made that game, Vinewoods was something that didn't even exist yet. One point I have that is kinda leaning more towards the ugly side if I'm honest, is that I've had my autosave in GTA San Andreas bug out, so make sure to make some manual saves along the way. I was playing the final mission and yeah, I just had one of my saves bug out and then I had to start a new game, and luckily I was clever enough to reload the autosave so continue on with the mission, but it did give me a small heart attack, especially considering how much I had done on that save file. So hopefully that is something that they will fix, because that is definitely something that is in the non-acceptable branch. And yeah, of course, I couldn't go through this video without mentioning the rain. The more I was playing it, the more I found it just odd looking and more like a meme gif describing how you really felt. This really was a primary issue for me within GTA San Andreas when driving at high speed or when using a boat. In GTA 3 it's kind of bad, but in Vice City it was a little bit more manageable. Overall, I do feel that it's something that they should definitely address. Ironically enough, on PC there's already a mod out there that will make it a lot more appealing. Another thing that happened to discover, which I found something that was rather weird and definitely needs fixing, is the mission marker in GTA 5 City. They aren't instant and they do take a few seconds to trigger, and you even have to stand still. This doesn't always happen, but I've seen it happen a few times to a point where I made a note of it because it was getting a little bit irritating. Alright, and now the moment where everyone has been waiting for, the moment I start naming the ugly stuff. Ooh, let's get those comments ready! The render distance. Oh boy, especially when flying, the popping and the not too distant buildings being unrendered. I'm also not still 100% about how I feel about the draw distance in GTA San Andreas. Sure, it is cool to see the entire map, but it's also kind of strange, especially compared with these popping and just rendering issues. It doesn't really help the map at all. Personally, I do think that while it is nice that they have decided to be like, hey look guys, it's more draw distance, they should have probably think about the fact that because you have a further draw distance, the old render engine didn't exactly work anymore, considering the fact that it's used to having a bunch of fog and a bunch of things within the game as well. When it comes to the overall world, there are some things in there where I'm like, GTA 3 for example, the roads look a little bit too clean for my liking. GTA 3 really had this gritty feel, and because of the increased draw distance and the amount of, look guys, the game looks modern and fancy now, really kind of takes away a little bit of that feel. GTA 3, I understand they're trying to make it look more modern, but I wouldn't have minded if they made it a little bit more gritty. Vice City overall I think feels the best. San Andreas does a very good job too, in my opinion. Another ugly point that I definitely want them to get rid of as soon as possible is the weird ghosting that's happening behind the vehicles. Apparently, for what I've heard from Twitch chat, this seems to be an anti-aliasing kind of issue, so it hopefully shouldn't be too difficult to fix. It also does sometimes happen when the cars are set on fire and are still driving. For some reason, it looks like Minecraft, where you just keep seeing those little blocks of fire trailing behind the car. It's something that if you're paying attention to it, it's going to annoy you, but overall it's something that is definitely ugly and definitely has to be fixed because it just doesn't look good at all. Here's one that I definitely want to have fixed yesterday. GTA 3's constant crashing and overall instability with the frame drops. It is rough. Oh my. On PlayStation 5, where I've played the game, the crashing that I had was just way too much, honestly, especially with a game that doesn't have auto-saving for every time that you pick up a hidden package or do a taxi fare. I've had it happen where I missed out on 2 hidden packages because the game froze and I had to spend a bunch of time to try and find it. It just really was a frustrating experience having to figure out where it was again, and because the autosave doesn't save those side things all that well. I can deal with a crash here and there, but when a game starts crashing about 4 times in the roughly 3 hours, it just becomes really obnoxious. And overall, GTA 3 is by far the most unstable version out of all of them. Vice City I've had no issues with whatsoever, except for the odd framed up here and there. Same for San Andreas, I think I've had it crash once on launch day on PC, but on console, on PlayStation 5, no issues there. Obviously, all of the games across the board have some instability issues when the game gets a little bit too busy, and then the frame drops start to happen, even on performance mode. Apparently, also on performance mode, there are some things happening that are still enabled in the fidelity mode too, which is probably where the issue lies. So hopefully they'll fix that soon, especially GTA 3's crashing needs to be fixed as soon as possible. That was my list of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I do want to touch on one last thing. While my list is probably going to miss a few things that were good, bad, or ugly, I think it narrows it down pretty well, and I want to touch on one final thing before I go. I feel that it was going to be impossible that we're ever going to have the perfect remaster. There was always going to be issues with it one way or another. Old bugs are still within the game, new bugs have re-emerged, and just overall, the experience so far is on the rougher side. I do feel that Rockstar has made a mistake by making a studio of 27 people trying to remaster games on the scope of this. GTA San Andreas by itself is a 100-hour game. GTA 3 is about 30-40 hours. Vice City probably along the same length, if not a little bit shorter. Grove Street Games simply should have had way more support from Rockstar's side and not just be left with their own demise and you guys go figure it out. Here's Epic Games and their wonderful Unreal Engine and best of luck to you. I think that this game should have had a little bit more development time, and as we can tell by the rumors floating around the fact that Kotaku has leaked all those months ago that the game was constantly being delayed internally, it kind of speaks volume that maybe, just maybe, this game should have been in the oven for a little while longer. While overall I have enjoyed my time with these remasters, that is mainly because the games themselves were already good. GTA 3, Vice City and San Andreas are one of the best games ever made, make no mistake about that. These remasters overall are a good experience, and if you were to buy these games, you will have a good time with them. There will be some issues here and there, you will encounter a bug or two, and in case of GTA 3, your game will crash here and there. If it is something that you can look behind or just simply want to have 3 games that will keep you busy for many hours for the next few weeks, if not months, then this is definitely a worthwhile pickup. But keep in mind, you are picking up 3 games that were released in 2001, 2002 and 2004 respectively. These games still feel like they did back then and they still pretty much are the same game. This game is not a remake. This game will not allow you to start swimming with Claude or Tommy or just have entirely different motion capture type of scenes either. If we were ever going to have a remake, I don't know how the community was going to feel about it either, considering the fact if you look at the Mafia 1 remake, while the game overall is fantastic and they did an amazing job on it, the hardcore fans were critiquing the game about the fact that they changed up the dialogue, they changed up the story, they changed up the voice actors, they changed up a bunch of things that those hardcore fans did not like. And I think that as a community, we have to ask ourselves, what exactly did we want? Did we want to have a remake? But in that remake, they would start from scratch. They would change things. They would change things that we loved about the game. Would we be okay with that? Would we have been okay with the fact that Claude suddenly has a voice or Tommy Vercetti has a different voice actor? Because there's no way that you're going to get Ray Liotta back. There was no way you're going to be able to rise people from the dead to do their voice acting job yet again. There was no way that all these people who did all their roles years ago were going to be able to get back into the motion capture suit. I think Samuel L. Jackson doing Officer Tampany again would be great, but I don't necessarily think that he has time and or desire to get into a motion capture suit that tell Pulaski that he is an asshole. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I agree with the way that Take-Two and or Rockstar has gone about taking down all these mods and all these things that they have done to make these remasters happen and make them sell. I don't agree with it. I'm with you on that one. But I don't personally think that it's fair to judge these remasters on the politics behind the games rather than the games themselves. This is why I made this video. So I can give everyone an informed opinion about what these games are, what the issues with them are, and what's great about them. There was never going to be a perfect remaster. I think that was always going to be impossible. If they were to have fixed certain bugs within the old game, people were going to be like, oh man, they fixed that bug. There was always going to be something that was going to be wrong with it. Undoubtedly, this remaster should have had some more time and attention done to them, but I think a lot of the current criticism to these games are not really something that really affects your overall gameplay experience. It's a little bit of attention to detail that is definitely lacking within these remasters. But if you're someone who doesn't really care about if there is a texture that looks a little bit funky or a little bit of nitpicky this or nitpicky that, you can pick up the game and just have a good time. If you're someone who is like, everything has to be perfect, and if it's not perfect, I want my money back, then I get that too. If you're someone who just simply does not want to give money to Rockstar at all because they're like, hey, this is not okay, Rockstar, you're making us pay for these old games and your remaster is not already that good, and you suffered and just went through all these mods and struck them down, and I don't agree with it and I will not spend any money, then you're more than in right to do that as well. But I find it important that if you do decide to criticize Rockstar for their way that they've gone about taking down mods, you should focus your criticism on that and not on the remasters themselves. So to answer the big question, should you buy the Trilogy remasters? Personally, I'd say that if you've never ever played GTA 3, Vice City and or San Andreas, then yes, definitely. These games are on one of those type of games that you've had to have played. It's in that type of category. Especially Vice City and San Andreas are two games that you've had to have played. And these remasters are definitely a great way of doing so. While they are not like the originals in terms of how they look, they might look a little bit better and you might have a little bit of a better experience than you would have in the originals, considering the fact that some of the controls in there were a little bit rough, especially on PlayStation 2, which was the actual original game ever released. Because oh boy, those aim assists back then was very rough in GTA 3 and Vice City. And if you're someone who just wants to go back and revisit these games, you're gonna have to ask yourself the question, how much have I played it, how long ago has it been, and how much am I dying to replay this again if I don't have the originals already. I've given you all the facts within this video, and now it's really up to you to decide if you find it worth it to pick it up now, wait for some patches, or just wait until it goes on discount. Regardless, they're still great games, because they already were great games when they were first released. Other than that, I'm gonna stop rambling now, and I'm gonna thank you also very much for watching through this very long video, but I hope that it answered all your questions and possibly even gave you some more information that you didn't know just yet. Thank you also very much again for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and if you really like what you see on the channel, please do consider becoming a member like Chloe, Robert, Alusfire, Captain Price, Shikulu, Madman Dakota, and Dr. Strangelove. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you all later.